This is The Final Word with Geoff Lemon and Adam Collins, a cricket podcast that's about cricket and sometimes things other than cricket. A large show, le grand show, as they say in French today. We've got segments galore. We've got a couple of interviews on the show coming up today. We've got Shadi Khan Saif, who has just got out of Kabul last night and is talking to us about Afghanistan and particularly cricket in Afghanistan and what the Taliban takeover might mean for the future of the game there. We've got Conn on as well, talking about Justin Langer, the Australian coach, and his future. And we've got various other bits and pieces. And we also, importantly, have Adam Collins back from holiday, taking a glorious several days, several days, maybe 4, maybe 5, who knows, off from the world of doing cricket podcasting, and now back in the hot seat. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I was away for 4 nights there in the west of Wales, which was about as short as you can say you've been on holiday for. If you've been away for 2 or 3 nights, you've not been on holiday. 4 nights, I guess it kind of counts. But it was lovely. It was most of the wholesome time away with Winnie's best mate, another one of our NCT sort of antenatal group couples, and the parents live out there in Wales, so we took full advantage of that and did very sort of wholesome things like go to soft play centres and sort of watch films at night and go to bed early and that kind of thing. And by the time I returned for a family do of my own or Rachel's family on Saturday, I was pretty much back to work, really. So, but that's all right. What do they say? When you're finishing one holiday, you should book the next one. So we're going to go away in October, and we've committed to that. So I'm feeling okay about the huge amount of work we have over the next 5 or 6 weeks. It should be exciting.
When I was speaking to you on the phone earlier, I could hear Winnie in the background, and all she was saying was Bluey.
Oh,
is this the stage of parenting you're at now?
It is. I mean, well, yeah, that's it. It's exactly that. She's got lots of words. I think we reckon she might have like somewhere between 100 and 200 words, which is remarkable when you consider like the little baby that you saw 6 months ago, but she's growing very quickly. She's actually graduated to the next room at nursery. She's from the little baby's room to the not so little baby's room because she can kind of walk a little bit now. And we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, that she's not quite walking on her own, but walking enough that she isn't, she shouldn't be in the tiny baby room anymore. So it's good that she has a passion in life. My passions are pretty clear. You know what they are. Winnie's passions are Bluey. And she will insist on watching Bluey, and she flaps her arms about when the music comes on. It's been a great part of it, watching her sort of consumed by these characters on TV. It's really nice, actually.
And if she's got 200 words, that's a feature piece for the Daily Mail. She could be getting a day rate.
Well, yeah, that's right. And I think some of the sentences that she comes out with are more coherent than some of those that get printed in that newspaper as well. So it's fun.
An interesting thing that popped up this week, and it's related to Australian politics in a way, your old stomping ground, because, when you think about trade, you think about the name Truss. You think about Warren Truss, did a lot of work on the trade front in Australia. Liz Truss, the trade minister in the UK, has appointed Ian Botham as the trade envoy representative, special envoy, Barnaby Joyce style, I don't know, to Australia. What is Lord Botham apparently going to do for trade between the UK and Oz?
Yeah, it was brought to my attention yesterday that when Botham became Lord Botham last year, that he made reference to the fact that he would make a contribution on sport and matters of land, which are things that he knows about. That he wouldn't be, of course, negotiating a trade deal with Japan. But he might be negotiating a trade deal with Australia. Not literally. I know that's not his job. The trade deal's been done. But the very fact that he's got that title, I mean, what a world, really. I mean, as Miranda Hyde was writing, I'll do that again. Yep. As Marina Hyde was writing today in The Guardian, I mean, it's quite the achievement to have taken a photo of your old boy and popped it on Twitter and now be in the House of Lords and now have this kind of responsibility. It's proof that there are no limits. There really is no cancellation, not truly, if you're big enough. The world is big enough if you're good enough, and Botham was certainly good enough as a player and been able to parlay that into many other parts of professional life, and that includes now being the trade envoy to Australia. So,
and as
fair play to him.
As far as transport goes, Ian Botham on aeroplanes in Australia famously, enjoyed some long haul flights. Enjoyed the flight to Perth
sure he did
on occasion. So, look, we'll see how things turn out on that front. The 100 is done. All of the wrangling over the 100 continues. I watched the eliminators and the final. I was doing the live blogs on those 4 games, and now you're up to the quarterfinals in the T20 Blast, which I do keep thinking, like, maybe if they put all the money for promotion that they put into the 100 into the T20 Blast, it would have the success stories that they've been able to talk about with the 100. With, look how many people watched and how many people came and how many people saw it on television. And, like, yes, all of those things could possibly have happened with other cricket that already existed. But there we are.
Yeah, possibly. If you said that on in some parts of the internet, you'd be very popular for saying that. I think it's true that if the Blast received more promotional activity and if it was shorter and not such an unwieldy competition, remember that every county plays how many games? They play 14 games each in the Blast. So
14 against each opponent, 7 home, 7 away.
I mean, they really do. In fact, it might even be... I should know this given I've been doing the Blast for the last 4 years. In any case, there's a lot of cricket, right? And it does become wallpaper after a while, whereas this didn't have that feel. This felt more like the Big Bash where there was a game a night. Whether it was on free-to-air television or not, there was a kind of an understanding that this was a thing that it was appointment viewing, right? Well, at least that's what they're going for. And the women's games as the curtain raiser. Now, they weren't a curtain raiser to diminish what they were, but that's essentially what the role they performed. They were in the afternoon. The men's games were in the evening. They had quite a nice rhythm when you got a chance to kind of plug in and watch. And it built to a final with a few characters that people were following closely. They released Mo and Ali from the Test squad to play in the final, which I'm sure will come back to bite them if he gets out swinging first ball in the Test at Leeds this week. But be that as it may, and look, the competition might be over, but the stoush continues. So there was a story in the Guardian today that Ali Martin wrote about executive bonuses and remuneration for some of the senior execs at the ECB, which directly falls into that slipstream. It shouldn't, but people inevitably draw the conclusion that, well, if cricket's stuffed and we need the 100 and we've lost all this money, how can it be possible that executives are being paid handsomely? Now, I don't think it's as straightforward as that. I think you need to pay sizable salaries in order to get talented people to administer cricket. We've got an interview with Conn coming up later on when he says a similar thing about Cricket Australia. So I don't think it's quite as simple as adding 2 and 2 together and reaching 4 there. But the point stands that there is a lot of, as Henry Moran said to us a couple of weeks ago, there's a lot of distrust out there right now between different parts of the cricket landscape, and that's unfortunate, but yes, there's still tons of cricket left. There was a tweet that went out from the 100 account, the official account, when it was all over, saying something like, what will we ever do? We have to wait an entire year till this returns. And the natural pile-on, like we're in the middle of a test series between India and playing England over here. The Blast pointy end is about to arrive. Likewise, the race to Lords, or the race of September in the county championship in the divisional set, which is starting, I think, next week. Yes, next week after this test match. There's 8 limited overs internationals between New Zealand and England being played over here, 3 T20s and 5 one-dayers. So there is so much cricket to come this summer. It didn't end because the 100 finished on Saturday night. So, it's about, I suppose, merging those threads and hopefully finding a place for all of these competitions to coexist in summers to come.
I would also make the point with paying large salaries to talented people that there are an awful lot of people on large salaries who are not at all talented, but still get the large salaries. I'll leave it up to our listeners to decide, to identify which ones are which.
I wouldn't move. Sorry, I'll revisit that. It's not about like whether people are talented now and it's an incentive structure, right? I mean, if you want to get the best people to work in cricket, and why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we want to get the best talent available to work in cricket? It has to be more than just simply people that want to wear a lanyard and take selfies with celebrities, right? You need to have, because like at some level, as cricket fans, as sport fans, it's kind of an addictive thing, wanting to be in the mainframe of sport. I'm sure that partially informs our own experiences. We wanted to be part of it. It's something that we were passionate about, and in turn, we were willing to work for very little money early on. That doesn't quite translate through to people making decisions about multi-million-dollar budgets week in, week out, allocation of scarce resources and all the rest of it. You want talented, experienced, credible executives stepping up, and that means you've got to pay them well.
Yes.
Bit of a diversion, but just a point worth making.
Indeed. New Zealand women have arrived in the UK, is that right?
Yes, they have. Susie Bates made runs yesterday in the warm-up game, the first warm-up game. I think they played a 50-over game against England A.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was England A. But yeah, the point is that Susie Bates, who has 4 or 5 serious injuries in the last 2 years, Geoff, something like that. It's one thing after another with her. But yeah, 34 years of age, I reckon Susie is now. And yeah, exciting that she's coming here fit, back in form, start of an 8-game series that begins this time next week with the T20s. Yeah, great to see her back.
Yorkshire in the news for all the wrong reasons, as they have been for a while. The pretty strange weak statement that they put out after their supposed internal investigation about racism at the county, the issues that were raised by Azim Rafiq. We're going to come back to that in a future ep where we can look at it properly and in depth rather than trying to rush through it today. And there's still quite a bit more on that story to come out, but it is moving apace.
It is. Azim Rafiq is furious with Yorkshire, who apologised, but I mean, the statement, sometimes I'd rather organisations didn't bother with statements because there are so many caveats and so much compromise with the written word. They want to get it so right that you end up getting it so wrong. And I think this is an example of that. So I think we should do a full episode on Azim Rafiq. And I actually think that we should fold into it what's going on in South Africa. The open-ended statement that Mark Boucher issued a couple of days ago, which didn't directly address the allegations, but did, as best as I can understand from the reporting, did accept a degree of culpability for what happened with players in the dressing room with him when he was a player. Of course, now he's the head coach of South Africa. So a different layer of scrutiny being applied to him than some of his former teammates. And there'll be a second statement where he has to address what's been put to him. So I think that it's worth us sort of shelving both topics in the short term in order to give them what they deserve, which is proper focus from our podcast when the time's right in a couple of weeks.
Well, Mark Boucher played over 100 tests, and as we know, if you've done that, you make a great coach. Them's the rules. I don't write the rules, but that's how they work. The next England-India test will be starting, I reckon, probably 3 hours after this episode comes out, the way things go. So this could be the preview episode for that test match, but it's not really because we've got too many other things to do. David Malan is back. Mark Wood is gone. Will Ashwin play for India? Probably. Do they do an Ashwin and Shardul Thakur sort of switch up in order to strengthen the batting a bit? They can't really drop any of their quicks because they're all bowling so well, India.
Yeah, Ashwin's been doing his own media again on YouTube. I fucking love the bloke. He's so good. Explaining how he was... and Kohli said this, by the way. Kohli said at the toss last week they had a squad of 12 ready to play, but Ashwin, per his own platform, was like basically ready to play as they were tossing, as I understand it, and was told, no, you won't be playing. We're going to go with the 4 quicks based on the weather. But I'd be staggered if they go into a test match. It's meant to be really nice weather here over the weekend. Can you imagine playing an entire test match in decent heat at Headingley without a spinner? I mean, I know Jadesia's a spinner, and he did a good job as a holding bowler at Lords, but your best spinner, I just don't see it happening. I think they'll have to find a way. And I'm looking forward to making the Daily Show again, Geoff. They have gone bananas when we were working on them last week during the Lords test. So hopefully we can have a similar level of traction this week, both on the podcast feed and on YouTube. We'll make them about, if we have our act together, we've usually filed them within about 40 minutes of stumps, so they tend to get up about between 60 and 90 minutes after the close of play, both on YouTube and then subsequently in the podcast feed.
It definitely helps to have a tense end of day 5 finish for a test match, because they can be very one-sided at times, or they can just have 3 days out of 5 of rain, but that sounds like that won't be the case for the Leeds test, and we've seen some pretty good tests at Headingley, so fingers crossed for that. We are going to go to this interview with Mel Conn about Justin Langer, but I think I've got to shake things up in the order a bit for reasons that will become clear very shortly. I think we've got to bring Nerd Pledge forward in the show, Adam, if that's all right with you.
You're calling an audible, as they say in American football. I like this.
Is that a thing? An audible? What is it?
It is. It's when the quarterback decides to. And this will expose my lack of knowledge about a sport that I did play briefly as a teenager, where the quarterback decides, having seen the formation of the defence, to change the play that they've agreed on in the huddle. And there's a code that he will yell out to his offense to say that it's almost blank slate. Yeah. No, change your play. Here's the new play. Be ready to roll. So you're doing that right now. You've changed the run sheet on the go, and it sounds like we're about to do some Nerd Pledge.
I thought when they did an audible, it was when the quarterback tries to advertise an audiobook service to everyone on his team, and he's like, "Have you guys heard about the great deals you can get at Audible?"
I don't want to turn into an advertisement for Audible, but Audible's quite good. Have you used it?
I haven't. I read books. I like reading. I've never got into audiobooks. I suppose I listen to podcasts, but which might not be entirely dissimilar. But look, Audible gives money to every other podcast in the world. Give us some money. We're a podcast. People listen to us. Give us some money, Audible. We just talked about you for free.
I see during the week that on the Audible charts that Miles Jupp, listener to The Final Word and cricket writer in his own right, has a book right towards the top of the Audible charts, which I've bought. So hello, Miles. And at some point, we'll probably get you on the show to talk about your cricket and other things.
Miles, advertise your book on the show. Give us some money. Look, the underlying thing is give us some money, which I suppose could tie to Nerd Pledge in some way, or as we like to call it, Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge. It's a game. It's a reverse quiz. We played this game with people on our Patreon page. So here's how it works. We need to fund 2 shows a week, and people help us do it. They send us a contribution, but they don't send us a normal amount. They send us a very specific amount of whatever currency they choose, because it relates in some way to cricket, and we have to figure out what the number means. For instance, the number this week is from David Whiteley, and it is $8.50.
Okay. So David's number, just scrolling through the page here, does come with a clue. My number doesn't relate to the monthly figure. It relates to an end-of-year total that would be 102 asterisks. So he's got here indicating that I intend to continue my support. That's quite clever. As regards to a clue, if someone was planning to make a film about this, the player in question would probably be stoked if it was called A Star Is Reborn.
Now, I need to make clear once again, because people built out this, I do not mess with the order of the numbers of Nerd Pledge. They come up on the show as they come in, with a couple of administrative things for double headers and getting new numbers onto the show, for instance, and so on. This number came onto this episode of the show in the natural order of things, because I hadn't solved it yet. I didn't know what it meant. I just had the number in there, and it just so happens that this was the episode of the show in which we have a long conversation about Justin Langer. Now, 102 asterisk, 102 not out in cricketing terms, and A Star Is Born, that being the song from the movie that Justin Langer was completely obsessed with and went around singing all the time, as per the documentary that got made about the Australian cricket team. So 102 not out, and Justin Langer, I didn't even have to look this up. I know what this means. I watched every ball of it. 2001. At the Oval, the 5th test of the Ashes, when Justin Langer came back into the Australian Test team. Hence, A Star Is Reborn, as per David Whiteley's clue. Now, Langer was on the 2001 India trip, was batting first drop, as he'd done for most of his Test career. Didn't go too badly. Highest score of 58, lowest score of 19. The rest were 20s or 30s. Went okay. Ricky Ponting, on the other hand, had a horror series. He made 0, 6, 0, 0, and 11. And I happen to remember that when he made the 11, he got dropped on 0 twice before he got to 11. So it wasn't going too well in India. But the Australian team management decides that one player is the future in Ponting, and Langer is the past. And as an Australian first drop, you need to be making more than 30 or so. So punter gets pushed up the order to number 3 when they get to England. Damien Martin comes in at 6. It's really because they want to get Martin in the team, but they want to give him a bit of breathing space down the order. So, and Ponting has a very ordinary start in England. He goes 11, 14, 4, 14, 17, and then he bangs out 144 and 72 at Leeds. Speaking
20
of
years
Headingley.
ago, 20 years ago this week.
Was it? And
I
he's
saw
away.
Butch posting about it. Butch had a
Oh,
obviously because the star of the show there.
Yeah.
There was a montage made up. He goes, Jesus, 20 years, bloody hell. So anyway, there you go. Push on, please.
Montage, even Rocky had a montage. So Ponting's locked in at number 3. He's not going anywhere. But at the same time, Michael Slater goes off the rails. He had the weird stuff in India when he was losing his rag over Rail Dravid not walking when Slater thought he'd taken a catch that was a bump ball. He made 77 in the first Ashes Test in 01, but didn't make much thereafter. And then he, as far as I remember it, he missed the bus to team practice or to get to the game one morning during the 4th Test, something like that. He overslept and wasn't on the bus. And as a punishment, they said he's out for the 5th Test. And as it happens, that was the end of his career. He never got back. So Langer comes in as an opener, and it's really a stopgap position for that one Test match to see how he goes. But he makes 102 not out. And he's not out because he retires hurt because he gets bashed in the head for the 17th of 34 times in his career. Steve Harmison, was it? Or was he going around that early? No, maybe it was Andy Caddick.
No, that Test match, well, that 01, I know that Jimmy Orman definitely played. Darren Gough played. Phil Tufnell played his last Test match. So it would have been, I reckon it's Caddick, Gough, Ormond, Tufnell. That's my guess is the quartet.
I think Caddick was the one who hit him in the side of the helmet, and Langer was bleeding, got cut by the grill and retired hurt. But he was 102 not out when he did so. That was his first big 100 partnership with Matthew Hayden, and they went on to have 100 partnerships in their next 6 Test matches or something like that. Never looked back, stayed an opener until 2007, at which point he got into the coaching caper. And as it happens, that leads into the next bit of the show.
Beautifully done, Geoff. Yes, I remember that Test match. I was living in the States at the time, playing American football, as I mentioned before, actually, around that part of the year. And I remember staying up really late in order to watch or listen to. Actually, it was listening. I don't know how they did this. I don't know how this was possible, but I definitely listened to the radio and was tuning in to hear Mark Waugh's innings. Because at the time I was quite consumed with the idea that he would retain his spot till about age 42 or something like that. But no, the 100 that Waugh makes, which was kind of like his last great innings for Australia. Steve Waugh makes the century after returning from deep vein thrombosis and ends up kind of with the naked bat, no stickers on it, waving it to the crowd, laying on the floor after being nearly run out for 99, bringing up his 100th run. I think Steve goes on to make maybe
150.
180 odd, 150, right?
150 not, I think.
120.
Yeah.
So
Mark was out
galloping
down the wicket, trying to smash. I think it was Caddick again, trying to just swing him over mid-wicket.
Yeah, it was. I think it was Gough. So after he passes 100, Waugh tees off and he pops Tufnell into the into what later became the OCS stand. I'm not sure what it was called at that time. And then I think he might have made room and smacked Jimmy Ormond in that direction. But they bring back Gough and knocks him over. But I argued subsequently that Mark Waugh should have retired after that Test. Like, it doesn't get much better than that. His 21st 100, his average was above 43. He'd won the Ashes again for like the 8th time or something ridiculous. And after that, the last year and a half or whatever it was, turned out to be quite a modest period of his career. But no, it was an exciting way for it to end. And yeah, Glenn McGrath cleaned them up, didn't he, to finish the series, and a comprehensive finish. But yeah, the Langer storyline was an important one, overtaking Michael Slater, who started the series really well. I think that 77 you referred to, was it 16 in the first over? Maybe 18 in the first over?
Yeah.
He really went nuts. And then I think they made a decision that they thought that longer term that they really wanted to get Langer back in, and Martin couldn't be dropped. Martin was established. And
Martin was making hundreds at that point in that series.
Yeah, and that was the start of another sort of regeneration of that era.
So, David Whiteley, because you're the nerd pledger on this show, you get to give away a slab of Brick Lane beer. You can give it to someone in Australia. So that could be you if you're in Australia. If not, it has to be someone who you like in Australia. Brick Lane, they make beer. You would have heard about them off the top. The One Love Pale Ale, the Backyarder, easy session lagers, and many, many others. They've got some very fancy beers as well, some sort of Belgian style stuff and all kinds of Belgium style. So, yeah, Woodstock, not Woodstock, Brick Lane, bricklanebrewing.com.au. You can check out their work. Woodstock make cricket bats.
Woodstock make the 660ml cans that you get when you're 16 years old. And the bourbon and Coke cans. Brick Lane, on the other hand, make a range of beers, including the low alcohol option. Mm-hmm. I know Jay in the voiceover off the front mentioned this over the last couple of weeks, that there is more demand for low alcohol beer than ever before. So Brick Lane have been equal to that task and made one of their own. So you can get yourself part of that. And yeah, as we've mentioned in the past, we love working with Brick Lane because they are fundamentally good people trying to do good things, whether it be the resources they use to make the products, the staff they employ, the environmental practices to make sure they emit as few emissions as they can on the way through. So if you can visit them at Queen Victoria Market or there in Dandenong South to get the draft version of what they're doing, or pick up some cans in the local bottle shop and follow them on social media. Tag us in and let us know that you got yourself a can of Brick Lane. And
if you send us a Nerd Pledge, you can give someone a case. You have a very good chance of doing that. Maybe like a 1 in 8, 1 in 7 chance, depending on the week. No, 2 in 7, 2 in 8.
2 in 7, yeah.
I mean, that's better than 1. That's twice as many as 1. So send us a Nerd Pledge. You go to patreon.com/thefinalword. You send us a Nerd Pledge. That helps us make the show, and potentially you get a case of 24 Brick Lanes. Sounds pretty good. Right, we're going to move on into our first feature interview of the show today. Next up, Malcolm Conn. It's the final word. Geoff Lemon, Adam Collins, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Malcolm Conn, who has jumped over the fence a couple of times in the last few years. Obviously, a journalist for decades, went and worked in cricket media administration for a number of years, and now has hopped back over the fence. So maybe we'll start there, Mel, with getting back into the journalistic fray and how it feels to be back in the middle of it.
Yeah, look, I'm really enjoying it. I'm sort of obviously grateful for the Sydney Morning Herald to give me the opportunity to be chief cricket writer, and after 6 or 7 years working in cricket with Cricket Australia and Cricket New South Wales in a joint role, it's quite eye-opening at times. You realised how much hard work goes in by so many people to make things happen, and you really appreciate the passion that they have for cricket and the long hours they work during summer. So, look, I'm really glad I did it, but I feel like cricket writing is my calling, and so it's great to be back. And I think I've lost a few more friends over the last few weeks, but I didn't have many anyway. So.
It's an interesting position that you find yourself in because, you know, suddenly the story is about the coach of the Australian cricket team, the relationship between Justin Langer and his players, and there are lots of things that you were privy to being on that side of the fence that it must be tricky trying to work out what you can write about, what you should write about, you know, what you have a responsibility to say, what you have a responsibility not to say, when you've been approaching this as part of your job for the last few weeks.
Well, yes, that's right. And particularly a piece I wrote last week, a sort of a first-person piece during 2019 when I toured with the team at various stages, sort of on the team bus, in the team hotel, in team meetings, and then around the team sort of during the World Cup for stages, during the 2019 Ashes, and then a 2020 series against Sri Lanka and Australia in 2019 that everyone's forgotten. So it's been a really interesting sort of, was an interesting time, and you obviously saw and heard a lot, and I'm certainly determined not to give away any state secrets, but I just thought in that the first person piece that I did write that I could give what I thought were a few fairly trivial incidents, just to highlight the tension or the stress around Justin Langer and his coaching. So, yeah, you're right, it is a fine line. It's a grey area. There's been sort of quite a bit of feedback one way or the other about whether I should or I shouldn't have done it. I've had a lot of journos of saying, look, I wouldn't have done it, but good on you for doing it. I really enjoyed reading it. So it does put you in an interesting position. But I think that as long as you don't give away state secrets, I think that it's fine. And I thought it was really important as the bubbles were building up around the cauldron of Justin's coaching again, that people were given some perspective about what it was like. So a few trivial incidents, I hope we're able to highlight that.
Yeah, I was going to come to this later on, but I suppose now we're here, we may as well flesh it out a little bit. So the piece that you wrote did kind of make you part of the story. And I suppose, given you've been the one narrating the story for your entire career, and then on the other side of the fence controlling the story, suddenly you kind of are the story in this tornado that was the coverage of Justin Langer's travails over the last couple of weeks. How did that feel for you, having been usually the one writing it, suddenly being the one who everyone wanted to talk about?
Well, it's a bit strange, but I felt it was a story about Justin Langer and his coaching. It was just done from an insider's perspective, I suppose, in terms of you got to see and hear things that other people didn't get to see and hear. So I didn't really think it was about myself. I just thought it was an opportunity for me to put forward some of the sort of inner workings that might have painted a bigger picture for people to understand why all this fuss was taking place.
And in terms of the criticism that's sort of come your way as part of that you had a responsibility to your previous employer, but also to your existing readers. And I suppose the other idea that a lot of people finish up in cricket as players or administrators or coaches, and often will write a memoir that details all of this, that what you have done isn't miles away from that. Is that how you've seen this in response to the criticism?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, every time a prominent player retires, they write a book. And then in many cases, I've covered that player's entire career and sort of lived it daily. And yet I find out reading the book how little I actually know about what went on. So there's certainly a lot in those books that other people don't know. Now, a lot of people might say, oh, they're trivial, they're not giving away state secrets or whatever. But I just think that it's one of those things that's what people want to read. I mean, clearly the readership that story got was far more than I've got in the few months that I've been back in journalism, right. And sort of one of the biggest on the paper this year, I think. So it shows that people do want to know about the inner workings. That's why cricket books from prominent people sell, and that's why it's important, if you can, I think, to offer some sort of a view of the inner workings if you've got that privilege.
So, Mel, can you take us through the story a bit, the Justin Langer story from the top? Because we're starting back in January when there's the reporting by Chris Barrett and Andrew Wu in the SMH saying that players weren't happy with the way Langer had gone about it. Then there were the behavioural reviews or whatever they called them into the way he'd gone about his job. And that was supposed to be put to bed a few weeks ago as the teams were heading off to the Caribbean. The spin was all about, everybody sat down, they've had a chat, everything's out in the open, everything's good now. And then weirdly, sort of within a week or so, Langer's public approach was saying, I haven't changed anything, I don't think I've done anything wrong. And suddenly we were back into the story being a problem again, and the way that he's gone about his job being a problem again. What has started to happen over the last few weeks from someone who's been following it very closely?
Right, well... It's something that's been going on for a long time. I mean, not long after Justin started back in 2018, he was appointed in May 2018, you started to hear sort of stories coming out about, gee, we've gone from one extreme to the other. We've gone from Darren Lehman, who might have been a bit loose, to Justin Langer, who's like an overwound spring. And at that stage, I wasn't taking much notice because I thought, you guys have made a mess of things in South Africa with Sandpaper Gate. The team hadn't been performing all that well. The behaviour was poor. You need some discipline. You need some values. You need some strong leadership, and I thought Justin would bring all those things, but it's just gone on and on and on. They had the first Ford review, which was supposed to be sort of an integration of Smith and Warner. There was comments made around that. There's on the 2009 Ashes tour that I was on, and various other sort of series on that year where I helped out. There was certainly conversations going on then. The latest Ford review after the India series, there was more conversations going on then. The players are sort of claiming that they said exactly what they felt. And then again, we had that, you're right, that sort of love-in, I suppose you would call it, before this coming tour, or the previous tour just gone, of the West Indies and Bangladesh, where they had the big meeting in the Gold Coast, and apparently there was a bit of a truth session. And very interested to see Aaron Finch, the one-day captain, who's usually a pretty sort of straight sort of a guy, pretty private sort of a guy, come out and say that Langer received some confronting feedback. So for him to say that publicly on the verge of a tour, I found it quite extraordinary. And it just showed I think the depth of conversation and the depth of frustration. This was just going on and on and on. So that when the teams come back, we hear that Justin Langer's had a run-in with a journalist after Gavin Davey, the team manager's had a blow-up with him. And in isolation, it's nothing. But I think it might have been one of our colleagues, Crash Craddock, or Peter Allwright might have been actually, who said that it's like a series of parking tickets. If you get enough of them, you go to jail. And it's just one incident after another that just shows the tightly wound up sort of micromanager style of Justin. And there was the big feedback, or one of the parts of the big feedback from those most recent tours was support staff, where there's supposed to be this structure put in place. Justin's got extra support staff now. You've got some really good support staff like Andrew McDonald, like Michael Divenuto, done a fair bit of coaching and are well regarded. And they're supposed to be more hands-on. Justin's supposed to be sort of taking a step back at times as the head coach and getting out of the player's face a bit and letting the assistants sort of take it from there at various times. And yet he's sort of, regardless of what's been agreed, sort of walking back in again and sort of getting all hands on. And people are saying, well, hang on, what are we supposed to be doing? So it's just one of those things that sort of, it's like, I guess, when you go on holidays and you stay at a dodgy hotel and there's people say, oh, what was it about the hotel? And you can't pick one thing, but there's probably 20 different things that were really annoying, and it just builds up. So that's where we've come to now, and the players were just getting sick of the fact that they weren't being listened to. They didn't know who they could go to. And so we ended up with Wednesday of last week, an emergency meeting between the chairman, Earl Eddings, and Chief Executive Nick Hockley from Cricket Australia, and the three in the leadership team, Tim Payne, the Test captain, Aaron Finch, the one-day captain, and then Paddy Cummins, the vice captain of everything, trying to sort this out as we're going into a 2020 World Cup and an Ashes year, sort of probably 2.5 years after the rumblings have actually first started.
Yeah, so it felt like the stories you referred to there, plus underperformance in the Caribbean and Bangladesh, sharp focus on that, get back to the country. And this almost like extraordinary step of CA having to pop a statement out at 6:30 at night or whatever it was to keep the wool from the door, all the speculation. I think your first person piece was published that morning, or it was being published that day or whatever it was. And there was so much brewing that they felt the need to pop a statement out, which bluntly looked a bit rushed. I mean, random capitalisation, Australia apostrophe. It felt like something that got pushed out the door at 5 minutes to midnight just to kind of make it clear that they weren't going to sack him, that the Ashes were coming up, that the World Cup's coming up and all the rest of it. Then the powwow you referred to later in the week, the emergency meeting. So it was reported with the leadership group that Langer was brought into later. It doesn't feel like, despite best efforts from administrators, that this has been launched yet. It feels like the conversation is still a bit of a watch this space day to day.
Well, this is like sort of putting a Band-Aid on a geyser, really. I mean, they've known about it for some time, done nothing about it, and then tried to sort of jump in at the last minute. And it's almost they've tried to circumvent the players, because the actual timing of that statement, my piece, I think, came out online on the Tuesday night, ran in the paper on the Wednesday morning. That statement came out on the Wednesday late afternoon.
Right.
Before they had, not just before they had the meeting with the players. It was almost like to circumvent the meeting with the players to say, well, we're running the show here and we're going to put out a statement saying that Justin Langer's staying before we meet the players. So the players are going, well, what's going on here? No one else knew the statement was coming. You were talking to us. Couldn't you just have a conversation with us first and let us know what was going on? So that wasn't a good start to trying to sort out the issues. And the statement itself, it basically said that Justin Langer has done a really good job reconnecting with the Australian people, which is true. He came in after Justin's got great passion. He's one of the players that I most admired in terms of how hard he worked to establish himself into what became an amazing career when there were times he looked just about finished. And he's also been a great statesman to come back and to pick up the pieces after Sandpaper Gate, and then to sort of get the trust back from the public and sort of get people to sort of around Australian cricket again. Here's a father figure that we can trust, a statesman who's done wonderful things, who'd run through big brick walls for the baggy green. So that side of it has been terrific. It's just the way the whole thing's sort of tended to unravel, I think, is derelict on Cricket Australia's part, that more wasn't done sooner.
Well, that seems to be the key part for me, and this was Sam Perry wrote about this in his Guardian piece as well, what you've just mentioned there, that the statement comes out before the meeting with the players. Now, it seems like more of the source of the tension rather than what Langer is or isn't doing is the fact that for a couple of years the players feel like they haven't been listened to, and it's gone on for so long that it started to really grate. For it to get to this point now where there's a major meeting being held and a few hours beforehand there's a public statement put out to say that CA's already made up its mind about what should be done, surely that's going to make your key players particularly shitty, and it's going to put them offside, leading up towards what's the next MOU period, the next round of player negotiations and all the rest of it. It doesn't bode well for that relationship between CA and its most important assets.
I think it bodes very poorly. I think preliminary MOU negotiations have already started. It finishes in July 2022, so that's less than a year away. So on the one hand, you've got senior leaders and Cricket Australia coming together and calling an uneasy truce about something that has been going on for more than 2 years that they feel they haven't been listened to, that nothing's been done about. And then you want, on the other hand, Cricket Australia want everyone to say, look, let's be partners. So it doesn't work like that, I'm afraid. There's going to be some pretty disenchanted players around that whole thing.
And then yesterday there was the Usman Khawaja intervention on YouTube, which was a fairly sizable one. It drove a lot of the coverage. The stabbed in the back headline, which ran in a couple of different publications, how he depicted the player's response to Langer through the media and so on. How do you think that's influenced the story, having a player of Khawaja's stature almost go out to bat for Langer? He didn't entirely do that, by the way, but certainly that's how you could write up his commentary, that he was in full support of the coach.
Well, I think he's certainly mellowed from my previous dealings with him, if that's his attitude now compared to when I dealt with him previously, and which obviously people can change over time. The comment that interested me most was that he was saying that the players have been stabbing the coach in the back. Well, Usman Khawaja is on the verge of being picked again to play for Australia. He could be next cab off the rank as an opening batsman or even a middle order batsman. Australia needs two batsmen to come into this coming summer. Now, you'd think that one of them will be Will Pucovski, but having recovered from a shoulder injury, but they're going to need somebody else, and that somebody else, if Usman Khawaja starts well, having had a good season last season, could be him. Now, how do you think the dressing room dynamic's going to work if you've got a grumpy coach trying not to be grumpy, a senior player who's trying to walk the tightrope of say what he thinks but not hurt his chances of getting back in the team, and 10 or 11 players saying, hang on a minute, you're the bloke that said we stabbed him in the back. It's going to be a pretty interesting dynamic in the dressing room.
Well, it strikes me as a very sort of unusual situation. I mean, I think Jared Whiteley made this point on his program this morning. It's very modern, isn't it? That someone would do a first-person statement down the barrel of the camera on their YouTube channel addressing questions that aren't necessarily being put to him. But I suppose it's pretty good PR. You can be cynical about this and say that he's backed in the coach at the very time that the coach needs someone to back him in.
Well, you could. I don't think it's that cut and dried. I think he did say some interesting stuff about how emotional JL was, how it's his biggest weakness, how it affects him. So it wasn't just and here's someone who has been in the system and has dealt with it, has seen it. We've seen it on the doco.
Sure.
So it wasn't cut and dried. It wasn't like, say, a teammate, former teammate and great mate like, say, an Adam Gilchrist or a Matthew Hayden coming out and just trying to sort of give it the blanket, leave him alone. He's a legend and he's doing a great job. He tried to balance it a bit, but I'm not sure. Apart from making sure his name was back in the mix again, I'm not sure what it's actually achieved. Really, it gave us another day's headlines, I suppose.
And then with something like the Matthew Hayden statements and other players who he's played with, Adam Gilchrist has been in his corner as well. It's interesting. Sam Perry noted this as well, that it becomes almost a generational war thing where the older players are basically saying, oh, well, the young players are they're all coddled and they're too soft and they all want to get their own way and they should just tough it up and be like people used to be in the old days. And this sort of idea that as long as you've played a shitload of cricket for Australia, then you can't be questioned. You must be good at whatever you do. But the fact is that when you look at coaching ranks, that's not the case. That's not borne out that way. Who are the really highly regarded coaches you mentioned earlier? Andrew McDonald and Michael Di Venuto, very fine cricketers, but they didn't have long established international careers. They put the lie to that idea that you must have been one of the best in one format to be one of the best in another job. How do you see that sort of panning out? Is that accurate to look at it that way as basically an older generation being cranky at a younger generation because that's what older generations do?
Oh, I think it was a relationship thing. Both Matthew Hayden and Adam Gilchrist are terrific fellows, and they're obviously close to JL. I mean, obviously, Hayden had that wonderful opening partnership with him over sort of 5 or 6 years, which was one of the great sort of periods in Australian cricket. And Gilly was a wonderful player, obviously, and would have been close to JL in Western Australia, where obviously, having moved from New South Wales, he spent most of his time. I think that there comes a period, and it's a difficult one, where former players have to decide whether they're former players or members of the media. And I think that sometimes there's a bit of a crossover. And I was really interested in Adam Gilchrist's comments the day before I wrote my piece, actually, where he was sort of quite agitated about it. And then sort of came back probably a bit more considered the next day and sort of thought, well, Cricket Australia's either got to back him or sack him. Now, that was a major sort of moment in this current debate, is that there's a bit of noise around, and all of a sudden there's sort of someone as pivotal as Gilly comes out and says, Cricket Australia got to decide whether to back him or sack him. So it's sort of, there it is, that we've taken another step, is it's come to that one of his great mates is sort of saying, and of course he's going to back him to stay, but at least he's put it on Cricket Australia to make a decision. So I thought that was a major moment, and I thought that was Gilly sort of showing that he wasn't just a great mate, that he was a member of the media, and he was sort of showing that we need to find out here in a balanced way what's going on.
Yeah, it felt as though in Gilchrist's case, he was willing to sort of have his initial almost emotional response to his mate being attacked and then step back from the flame a little bit and give a more considered answer. Whereas with Hayden, it was sort of, one non sequitur after another and, half an hour of, it's hard to kind of stitch together a coherent sentence some of the time because he's so emotionally engaged in the Langer story, which he is at great lengths to explain in his interview on SCN that he is like a brother to him and all the rest of it. So I'm not sure whether that necessarily helps the case for the defence when Matthew Hayden's out there litigating it, but nevertheless, that's going to continue to be part of it. I also wonder how many more of these little stories might get out there via you and Daniel Bredig, who obviously has joined your stable there at 9, for example, and Andrew Webster, who was in his column on Saturday writing about these payments around the Amazon documentary. Again, it doesn't seem like a lot in isolation, but when you fold it into everything else, it's almost death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, that's right. And this is a story that's going to continue to evolve. I mean, the statement that Cricket Australia put out, and then 2 days later, Tim Payne came out on his radio show in Hobart and said that, we're all going to sort of head together with Justin for the next 6 months. Cricket Australia had said, well, he's seeing out his contract, which is in the middle of next year. So it's a very finite time and it's going to come around very quickly. So the question is going to be asked, it's like the footy coach. Are you going to renew his contract? Oh, we'll consider that at the time. Well, there have been coaches. I think Darren Lehmann was one that had his contract renewed well before time at various stages. So to me, it's almost like they're trying to cut particularly the Australian Cricket Board, Cricket Australia, are trying to cut themselves some room to sort of say, well, no, we're not going to bend to the players. He is going to see out his contract, but I think that'll be it. So, I mean, if we win and this is what players and support staff have been concerned about. They don't want to say, we don't want to get to a stage where we win the Ashes 4-0 and then Justin's contract comes up and it papers over all the cracks and he's a hero and we just sign him up without even thinking about it or things go on as they are. They wanted to sort of let it be known sooner rather than later that this is a big issue that needs dealing with. It's affecting everybody. And we don't want it to be lost in euphoria at the last minute. Especially when it's an Ashes series that feels at this stage that it should be Australia's to lose. I mean, it's not as though we're going into a home summer
where we're thinking that England can be super competitive, like 10-11, for example. This has got far more sort of, dare I say it, 13-14 energy coming in, given how discombobulated England have been over the last couple of years.
Oh, absolutely. Their batting lineup is terrible, and you can sort of, it's a deck chairs on the Titanic sort of scenario with their top order. They've just got Sibley, who's clearly not, dumped him, is clearly not up to it, and I've brought in David Malan, who has shown previously that he's been very inconsistent and underperforming at that level. So they really don't seem to have anywhere to go. So outside Root and Stokes, if he tours, their batting's very fragile, and Australia's fast bowling unit really should make a mess of them.
And for the most part, a coach, in your sort of footy analogy, a coach who knows that the contract's not getting extended often doesn't see out the last year of it, because, you know, if they're not going to be part of it going forward, then there's almost no point in having them see out a final year or whatever it may be.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, because Justin's contract finishes in July, I think, of next year. And then when the Australian summer is finished, Australia's supposed to be going to Pakistan. And we've got a Sri Lankan tour just on the cusp in there somewhere as well. So it's going to be interesting to see if they say, okay, Justin goes through the Ashes. Does he then go out in a blaze of glory and everyone shakes hands and says, oh, look, I've had enough, it's someone else's turn and thanks very much. Because Justin's going to fight. In everything he's done, Justin's fought to get where he's got. And this is going to be no different. It's not like he's just going to say, okay, yeah, look, I've had enough, I'm out. He's not that sort of person. So there's going to have to be some sort of handshake deal done if he's not going to go on beyond the Ashes. And if he is going on beyond the Ashes, it seems pointless starting to send him on subcontinental tours when they really should be bringing in someone new and fresh to pick it up then, not halfway through the year.
Is that where you think this lands? I mean, from your perspective, if he's gotten through this week and in all likelihood a successful Australian summer, unless something goes radically wrong, that, you know, basically he does get renewed and we sort of go beyond this and look back in the rear vision mirror 6 months hence and say, wow, well, he nearly hit the fence, but they won the Ashes 4-0, you little beauty, 2 more years, 4 more years. Is that what you think actually happens here?
Look, I don't know. I mean, my gut feel is I'd be surprised if his contract was renewed. Having said that, I have no faith in Cricket Australia to make long-term decisions in the best interest of Australian cricket. I think that the people in charge, the cabal that runs the Australian cricket through the Australian Cricket Board, have got themselves perched in the mirror most of the time, starting with the chairman, Earl Eddings. So I think that rampant self-interest comes first, and the good of Australian cricket comes second. So I'd be very interested to see where all that lands.
It wouldn't be a Malcolm Conn conversation without playing a shitload of shots, and you've done so right at the very end there. Love it, Mal. Thank you for joining us on The Final Word. It's great to have you back in the press box, firing things up, and looking forward to reading how you cover the rest of this saga.
Terrific, guys. Look forward to seeing you in the summer.
Woodstock Cricket. Sexy, sexy cricket bats, Geoff. They did the big rebrand over the winter, the new stickers, and they won they did the Quinella for the top 2 bats in England at the start of the season. Lots of people are using them. You're hearing it more and more. Woodstock Cricket. And guess what? Because you're listening to The Final Word, you can get yourself 20% off on one of these gorgeous bits of cricket bat. TFW 20 at the website you can see in the show notes, and get yourself a moderately priced cricket bat, which is comfortably one of the best in the world. That's a pretty good deal.
Not just the bats, 20% off gloves, pads, if they sell key rings, if they have a bat that you can open up the handle and it's hollow and it's full of premixed bourbon and Coke, 20% off that. I don't know if they offer that option, but they may at Woodstock. They're ideas, people.
They should merge.
They
might have the urge to merge. As I see that Melbourne have finished top of the ladder for the first time since 1964, and I think I've forgiven them for 1996. I think about, like, Gilly, for example, our friend Shannon Gill, who's been a great supporter of what we do and, of course, part of the Bad Producer stable. And I think about what this would mean to him and the way that they knocked off your blokes in the final second after the siren. To think that Melbourne had never won a game after the siren before, that's one of the great experiences in football. They'd never had that moment of winning a game after the hooter, and they did to go and finish top of the ladder. But I think the point here is I have forgiven them for 1996. It's only taken me a quarter of a century, but The fact that they voted themselves out of existence and we didn't, and we saved the day, is something I've held over Melbourne members, and I think I'm cool with it, and I think I want them to win the flag.
It may be to do with the 0 flags they've won since, and the 19 that you a lot won. But the after the siren. Well, Geelong makes a specialty of winning after the siren. They do it quite often, but it was nice because Max Gawn had lost a game against Geelong after the siren a couple of years ago. Had a kick to win and missed it. So it was nice for him to get one back. You can't really begrudge that, I suppose. I suppose it's pretty condescending to say, you've got to feel good for them having a good year. They had a good year once. Isn't that nice? First time since 2000. Anyway, good on them. We're here to talk about Woodstock, though. They make cricket bats. You can get one for 20% off. That's about all I need to say because they're the best bats going around. They won the awards for being the best cricket bats in the UK this year, 1 and 2. So check them out, woodstockcricket.co.uk. All the range. It's all there. TFW 20. Get your discount. This is the final word with Geoff Lemon and Adam Collins. Speaking of cricket bats, someone using one very well in the Caribbean over the last few days has been Fawad Alam. West Indies playing Pakistan in the test match over there. And we've been big Fawad Alam fans long before he got back into the Pakistan team. But you look at the record this guy has now. He's only played 13 test matches because he played 3, did more than okay, got a ton on debut, played 3 matches, and then got dropped, never came back for 10 more years. Came back in England last year, made a duck first up, made a couple of low scores in his next match, 21 and 0 not out. And since then, he's made 400s in 8 tests. So he's got 5 tons in 13 tests for his career at the moment. His average is up past 47. And suddenly, he's vindicating all of those arguments that he should have been in the team for about the last 10 years. Yeah,
it's a great story, Fawad Alam. This test was pretty well set up at the close of play on day 4. I'm sorry to report that since we started recording, the Windies have lost 2 wickets almost immediately upon resumption. So Pakistan should close it out from here. They need 7 wickets and West Indies need 256 runs on the final day at Sabina Park. But good series. It's a shame that it's a brief series, really. I understand and appreciate at the moment that touring overseas is tough, but this feels like the kind of series that I would love to go over 4 or 5 test matches, but not to be. Unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to discuss the thriller with you last week. You and Daniel did a lovely job of that. If Pakistan do go on to close this out, it's kind of, to me anyway, a shame that we get to this stage of proceedings and there's 2 test matches, then we go straight into the white ball stuff. And that's no reflection on the white ball stuff. I'm sure that'll be great. It's a shame that we can't crack on and have more tests.
I wasn't expecting the Matt Trapp last week to end with Daniel having a menage a trois with Jeremy Coney. But these are the kinds of things that you can learn on the final word. So if you haven't heard that story, best to listen back. Daniel and Norcross will explain it much better than I can. But
seeing the 2 of them come into work each day was quite something. Jeremy often would just look at me and go, "Yes, it's been another enthusiastic night at the Norcross household. We were dancing last night." He'd go on and tell you what they were dancing to and all the rest of it. So, I'm glad that he had such a fantastic last fortnight in the UK working with us, and can't wait to welcome him back next year.
Well, and you say that touring's difficult these days, and so you understand shorter tours. But in a sense, given it's so difficult to get overseas and to get back, maybe it makes more sense to go the other way and just play a 7-test series, just really lean in, play a couple of timeless tests, just say, all right, let's schedule 1 test this month and let's see how deep it can go. Why not lean in? Once you're over, it's like taking the boat over from England in the 1920s or whatever. Once you're over, you may as well play 43 first-class matches against every opposition. You may as well play a Victorian side of 22. You may as well play whoever's willing to roll up, smokers and non-smokers, because you already made the effort to be there.
Absolutely. Maybe this should be something we should put, that we should have longer test tours on the basis of COVID, not the other way around. I like the way you're steering that. But no, they've already had the white ball stuff, haven't they? They played these games before. It's a shame, really, that Pakistan won't now go on to play Afghanistan, which is the topic of our next conversation, Geoff. But that announcement came through not long before we started interviewing that they just can't find a way to kind of get that series up. They've cited the mental health strain of Afghanistan's players, just how much they've gone through in the last couple of weeks. The idea of them, I think they said in the statement they can't really put them into a camp now. There's no commercial flights out of Kabul anyway, but they can't put them in a camp now and then send them to Sri Lanka, which has a COVID problem anyway, as the neutral venue to play Pakistan. There was just too many hoops to jump through at this incredibly difficult time for the Afghanistan team. We saw Rashid Khan last week wearing the flag, the colours of the national flag on his cheeks, and obviously quite a proud young man, a match-winning effort, but at such a trying time for him personally. And yeah, it's difficult not to sort of, think that this is going to be very tough yards in the short term. It might require even Geoff, and we didn't have this conversation with Shadi necessarily, but the World T20 is only
it's not far
7 weeks away.
Yeah.
I mean, are they really fielding a team at the World? I mean, they might. I know they've got permission to, but there's a big gap between having permission to field a team and actually, getting them there.
Getting them there is the thing, and the real reason for this series cancellation is that there's no transport. You can't get out of Afghanistan at the moment.
Yeah.
So the airlines aren't flying there because they can't guarantee the safety of crews, and it's so dicey landing in Kabul in the first place. You've got the airport blocked off by gunmen and all the rest of it. So that's not going to happen. So players who are in the country, I'm not sure how they're supposed to get to the T20 World Cup. I mean, Rashid Khan was obviously affected by it towards the end of the 100. He was starting to bowl some ragged games, which you rarely see from him, but why wouldn't you? Because he was trying to push on, but cricket would be the last thing on his mind that actually mattered at the moment. So Afghanistan's been such a story of joy, the way that team has sprung up in even less than the last 20 years, really, the last 16 years, more so. And I think everybody who cares about cricket has, their hearts have gone through the floor seeing what's happening in Afghanistan. So we did want to get a more detailed picture of what's going on the ground there. Shadi Khan Saif is a journalist who covers politics in Afghanistan and Pakistan and has done for 20-odd years, and got out of Kabul last night at the time of recording on a Reuters flight that evacuated 100-odd journalists from the capital. So we caught up with him a couple of hours ago, and here's that interview with Shadi Khan Saif. This is the final word with Geoff Lemon and Adam Collins, and joining us today, having got out of Kabul last night, Shadi Khan Saif has landed safely, and it must have been a very eventful couple of days for you.
Yes, absolutely, Geoff. It was a roller coaster, to say the least. We had at least 4 attempts at the airport just to get out. Despite having a valid visa, passport, and all the reasons to escape the dangers that we were facing, the imminent threats. But still, I am sure many of your viewers and yourself must have seen the chaotic and deadly images of the airport. The international airport, the only way out at the moment from war-torn Afghanistan. So last night was a lucky night for me. After a couple of failed attempts, we made it out last night with a group of more than 100 journalists and their families and their relatives and their friends. All of them attempted these couple of failed attempts with us. We landed at the Islamabad airport, and the flight was not anywhere near a normal flight. They were, it was like, I don't know how to explain. We just landed, and even the airport staff was surprised. They said, "Where did you guys come from? Where are your boarding passes?" We had nothing, no boarding pass, no food on the plane. The toilet was in a mess because the plane was waiting for us. Our organization, Reuters, organized this evacuation. I'm really thankful to them. So then we came to our place. We had a rest of a few minutes, and here I am talking to you about the favorite sport, cricket in Afghanistan.
And it must be, it's an extraordinary thing that Reuters, as an employer, had to organise an evacuation flight and to organise this so quickly. Give us a sense of the last couple of weeks and just how much the world turned upside down so abruptly.
Well, right from the mid of August, August, the last day of the first week of August, there were speculations that the state structure, the government in Afghanistan was about to fall apart because the Taliban were advancing in a speed which was unprecedented. Nobody had a clue about it. So the deadline or the estimation that many people had in their mind was of a couple of months. That in a couple of months the Taliban will be in the city and then they'll start to overrun it, either through negotiations or fighting it out with the government forces. But nothing like that happened. It all happened in a matter of days. On a Sunday, not this Sunday, the one before, the government just collapsed. The president left the country fearing for his life, and here we were with the Taliban ruling us within days. And what happened afterwards was even worse, because people panicked, people frightened. They just rushed towards the airport, and the airport there were no security forces there. The forces had either left the country or they just surrendered, fearing for their lives. And many people died. Some went on to sit on plane, hoping to escape in that deadly manner. They died. Unfortunately, that American military plane took off with all those people sitting on its wings and all over it. And things never improved. Things has not improved yet. Situation is still very tense. People are in the same mood. They want to flee the country. Those fearing for their lives and their liberties, they are fleeing it. The Taliban have brought some order at the airport with the Americans and all the NATO allies. But people's sense of anxiety has not improved. They are in a desperate rush to leave, and that has been causing a deadlock, a bottleneck at all the entrance points of the airport, forcing people with documents and legitimate paperwork to wait anxiously for days. Our time just came last night after a wait of 10 hours right at the road. In our buses, we just stayed in our bus for at least 10 hours. And this is after the 3 failed attempts that we were given an entry through a lengthy negotiations of days. So that's what, I can explain at the moment.
Yeah, in the context of such a desperate situation, it feels almost glib to want to talk to you about cricket, but on the basis that you write for the Wisden Cricketers Almanac and report on Afghanistan cricket, I think there's been a lot of interest around the global game about what this will mean for Afghanistan and the game that is the #1 sport in the country. It's such an amazing, remarkable story, which has been documented through various films that have been made and pieces that have been written. And of course, Afghanistan rising to Test status in 2017 was so widely celebrated. But now we've already seen 1 tour cancelled. They won't be playing Pakistan next month. The statement that went out this afternoon that made it clear that the players wouldn't be in a fit state to participate, and also getting into Sri Lanka to play Pakistan wasn't going to be possible. We've seen a change in chairman yesterday. Azizullah Fazli has been brought back into the role. Of course, he was knocked off at the end of 2019 after the failed World Cup. A lot of issues there internally, but he's now been brought back in keeping with the wishes of the Taliban, who are now overseeing much of this. Can you give a bit of a sense of just how acute the challenges are going to be for Afghanistan cricket in the short term?
Well, the interesting bit here is that the interest among common people for this beautiful game has not dropped. It is the public interest. It is the enthusiasm amongst all Afghans of all ages, young and old. They love the game. They've simply fallen in love with the game, and that's what is driving the success. The administration before the recent changes, and even before that, right from the beginning, was never perfect. They always had issues with issues you can expect in a place like Afghanistan. But the success never reversed. Why? Because the interest is there. It is generating talent. Rashid Khan is phenomenal. The whole world knows him. Mohammad Nabi, you name them. There are a bunch of more stars coming because the interest is there. People love the game. There's a passion. They follow all commercial leagues played all over the globe. That is what is driving the success of Afghanistan cricket. It has, I would dare to say that it has nothing to do with the administration, good or bad, of the Afghanistan Cricket Board. It's the simple, raw talent, the interest, the enthusiasm that is driving the success, and it is still there. I hope it never reverses with the way things are heading, but I don't see any imminent threats to that enthusiasm going down. But administration, of course, it plays a part when you have all the funds and all the resources to control the domestic system and the international engagements and selection and, patronage of the players and promoting young talent. That does play a part. I'm not ruling it out. But the basic reason so far for the success has been the interest among people.
The relationship between the Taliban and cricket will be, I suppose, interesting is an understatement to see how it plays out, because 20 plus years ago, the Taliban generally seemed to have quite a lot of antipathy towards cricket. They generally regarded it as a Western incursion that should be resisted. More recently, even in the last few years, there have been bombings at cricket matches and so on. Do you expect there will be more support from the Taliban now for cricket, given that it's become so popular in the country in the last 20 years, that trying to shut it down might cause them to have troubles in trying to establish their dominance running the country?
Well, I'll tell you a very interesting thing. I think they will try desperately to promote. Why? Because you pointed that and then appointed the central bank. They are giving it a top priority. The men team, perhaps the efforts to come up with a women's team might see some problems, and I think it's that project, that initiative, I think, is simply dead. But as far as the men's cricket is concerned, I think the Taliban would they would try very hard to promote it and keep people engaged. And hopefully they will not do something silly with that.
Yeah, what strikes me is that there was so much positive momentum over the last few years. You raised the example of women's cricket. Just last year, 25 central contracts were given out to Afghanistan women for the first time, and there was that big camp they held before that to find this talent. There was, and that's just on women's cricket alone. Khan, when he visited from Pakistan, talking about the potential for bilateral tours into Afghanistan and playing in Pakistan. I mean, there was so much cause for enthusiasm about what might be possible in the short term, in terms of what might be achievable in the next 5 years, which all seems to now be on pause. Do you think that, and Geoff's question pointed to this, but now with the Taliban back in charge, that it'll be far more about taking stock and making sure the show kind of stays on the road rather than being necessarily ambitious about what might be possible in the short term?
Well, as I said, replying to the earlier question, I think they would, and they've already shown some signs about it. They would really try to promote the game. They would honestly try to promote the game. But the appointment of the new governor, the new guy, was there when Afghanistan saw its biggest disaster in its international cricket so far. Afghanistan was doing so well before the World Cup. People were considering it as an underdog with the potential to do great, but nothing happened. Afghanistan performed very well, but it lost most of its matches. And just before the World Cup, the controversial replacement of the captain and the blunders with the selection that is to me so far the biggest setback that the game of cricket has seen in Afghanistan. I saw many diehard cricket fans give up on sports. They said their hearts are broken because of what the cricket board did with the team just days before the World Cup. They were rebellion in the team. They were if I'm not wrong, the newly appointed chairman. So on one side, I think I'm positive that the Taliban will try to promote the game, but the appointment of the new chairman looks like a very strange decision to me.
In terms of the Taliban promoting the game, is that mostly going to be about trying to use an international cricket team as a way to legitimise themselves as a government?
Well, I think that would be too ambitious. I think I don't see any prospects for that in the short term, because that can't be that way. It has to be the other way. They first have to get the international recognition, and then they can invite and host international teams. They can't do it the other way by inviting foreign teams and then seeking recognition. But I think in terms of their domestic support, they need something positive to give it to the community. They need to show that they are not the Taliban of the past. They are not just about praying and all these religious aspects of their ideology. They would desperately want to show to the nation domestically, to convince the local population, to influence them that they want life to move on with some level of continuation of the past 20 years or so. And cricket is a major part of that experience that Afghans had in the past 20 years of relative peace.
So a lot of what you've written about and the work that you've done has been about the place of women in society in Afghanistan, the likelihood of repression coming back. You were writing only recently about repressive measures being taken against women under the previous regime that's just been swept away. And obviously that's the major point of concern for everybody looking at what might happen in the country over the next few months and then into the next couple of years. The position of women's cricket, Afghanistan didn't even have an international women's team playing under the previous administration. And as you say, the chances of that happening under a religious administration are very bleak. Where do you see this going over, say, the medium term of the next few years?
Well, I told you, I see prospects of that simply dead. When I used to speak with players, with officials under the previous administration, they were struggling very hard to convince people within the board, and they were fearful of going ahead with this idea. And that was despite the fact that Afghanistan was having a females football team. Afghanistan was having women in many other sports. But the problem with the cricket was that it was unable, because the scale of the game and the people following it was all over the country. It was not limited to few urban centers like football. In terms of international teams, that is what I'm talking about. So they were fearful of a backlash. They couldn't dare to prepare a team and launch it and send them to an international events or so. The best they could do was sign contracts with a few daring young girls who were willing to risk it because of their interest in the game, and they couldn't move ahead with that. So with the Taliban coming to power, I simply see that project done and dusted.
The women who have signed those contracts and who were playing up until recently, do you think that there's a likelihood of reprisals against them or their families? Do you think they'll be in danger for having been associated with playing professional sport recently?
Well, I hope not. I hope not. I desperately hope not. And that is something that we have to see. And that's, I think, it's a matter of concern. And it might get dangerous for them if they try to go ahead with it. But I don't see any prospect for that, because Afghanistan does not have facilities where they can go and play on their own. They were playing in the facilities of the cricket board, inside the arenas of the cricket board. So if officially those doors are closed for them, they have no way to go and express their interest.
Yep. And the reporting on the Afghanistan team, especially in the last, say, 2 or 3 years, it's all been about the positives. It's all been upbeat. It's been talking about the growth of the current men's team, of their potential into the future. The Taliban hasn't been mentioned even as a possible threat in any of the cricket reporting in the last few years. Do you think were we naive not to imagine that they might be returning to power at some point, given how tenacious they've been in keeping themselves around as a possibility to move in whenever the Americans moved out? Was that foolish of cricket to be looking at the optimistic side constantly and not considering the alternative?
Well, that's the thing with the cricket. There are many other simple stories. Take the example of rivalry between India and Pakistan. It always infringes into the arena of cricket. In Afghanistan, there were very focused efforts, and they still are, to keep the sports away from politics. The imminent threat of the Taliban takeover was always there, and people were fearful about it, even in the cricket board. But they never framed it, and they don't see it as a direct threat to the game or to the cricket board. That's what I think has kept it safe so far. And the other thing is that it's a game that is loved by the nation. So I don't see any reason for the Taliban to be naive enough to go and counter it. And I don't see any incentives for them. The only problem they might have with cricket is the female team. They, I think, would have and might have no problem with the men's team. As I said, they would instead like to promote it for their domestic popularity. And other than that, I don't see any and yes, but again, I would down of the appointment of the new chairman. If the board gets politicized, see, I'm referring to the administrative and the political aspects of it, not the military aspect of the Taliban. If the Taliban overlook the administrative aspect of it, the political aspects of it, and then the new leadership of the board starts making foolish decisions, that is something that can cause great harm to cricket in Afghanistan, not the military aspects of the Taliban.
Shadi Khan Saif, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're very glad that you've managed to make it out safely after what must have been a pretty terrifying few days.
Thank you very much. Glad to be with you.
This is The Final Word with Geoff Lemon and Adam Collins. Huge thanks to Shadi Khan Saif for making time to talk to the show, 12 hours after landing in Islamabad, calling us from his hotel room there, and managing to stay so upbeat. I suppose the life of a journalist covering politics from hotspots, it's a much harder graft than anything that we do covering sport. It sort of makes the rest of it seem like dilettantism in comparison. But he's done great work to have been covering news there for so long, and will keep doing so fearlessly, having made his way out of the country.
Yeah, I've loved corresponding with him the last few days and kind of getting a bit of a sense of what he's been going through. I say loved it. I mean, just enjoyed that he's been such a such a positive sort of guy, and obviously they've been going through the most dreadful time at the moment. But he's got the right disposition to get through what's going to be doubtless an incredibly challenging time, I'm sure. Just one point here, which I didn't really address too well in my questioning. There was so much positivity around Afghanistan cricket a couple of years ago. I mean, yes, sure, there was the World Cup that didn't go well, but they kind of got post-World Cup. I mean, they beat Ireland a couple of years ago comprehensively.
In a test match.
They beat Bangladesh in a test match in Chittagong, remember, of course, which was a sort of a landmark moment. They did have that change in administration. They changed the chair.
Well, they beat Zimbabwe recently. The first Test double 100 for Afghanistan, and had that amazing partnership with Asghar Afghan in there. The guy so proud he changed his name to the name of the country. So why not?
Well, and all of this is going on, in the backdrop of COVID. And yes, they did have to halve salaries last year, and that was a little bit chaotic with what happened to Lance Klusner and his package and all the rest of it, which drew a lot of focus. But that wasn't unusual around the cricket world last year with revenue not coming in and a lack of cricket. But just last year, they were talking about a roadmap to hosting international cricket in Kabul within 5 years. I mean, that's obviously not going to happen now. The fact that Imran Khan was so positive about the idea of trying to host bilateral series between the two countries, that's clearly not going to happen now, or at least not for a long time. The fact that in all of the coverage in the almanac that I was reading through, none of it even mentions the Taliban. Your question of yours, Geoff, pointed towards this. It's as though cricket was operating in a vacuum separate to the challenge that was clearly coming with the withdrawal of troops this year. And here we are. Like, it's kind of devastating that one of the greatest stories in modern cricket, if not the greatest story, now will take a turn. And again, super positive reflections there in the interview about what might be possible even under the Taliban, given the popularity of the sport. It's unlikely it'll go through a period of being persecuted as it was the previous time the Taliban were in charge and cricket was an absolute no-go, well, at least in a formal sense. But there are obviously now we're now in a very different part of this story, and let's hope there's a way that the game can continue to prosper in that part of the world, because it's been a mighty tale so far.
And the fact that, as Shada Ugra was writing about during the week, that women cricketers in Afghanistan are hiding their kit and distancing themselves from having played the game because they can't afford to be linked to it because they might be in danger, or they very probably would be in danger. So. Yeah,
this goes to the change in administration, right? I mean, we found out yesterday that the chair who got knocked off is now back again, and the progressive chair, Farah Yousafzai, who was pushing for more women involvement, he's now been jettisoned. I mean, funny that. Yeah. Someone who was pushing to get the game moving forward, talking about girls playing the game, he's no longer changing. So. Look, not a lot of this stuff will be explicit and overt, but it'll be clearly identifiable in the weeks and months to come, I'm sure.
Absolutely. We will move on into the last part of the show. Just a little look at a Bannerman, a cheeky Bannerman, because we haven't had a look at a Bannerman for a few weeks now. We were sent one by Andrew Nixon, a fine correspondent of ours, on the Bird app, and someone who follows associate and affiliate cricket extremely closely, sent us a note to say that he just realised, he says, that Extras made a very good run at the Women's T20 International Bannerman in a recent match between Italy and Austria. Now, this is a match in which Italy got bowled out for 73 in 17.1 overs. It's a phone number scorecard, as in everybody made single figures, except for extras. So the scorecard reads as follows: 4-0, 6-0, 6-7, 1-0, 8 not out. Strong down the order, 8 not out. 1 and 0. Extras, 40. 40 out of 73. And that is, I mean, that's well over half. That's getting pretty close.
It's a 55er. It's a 55er, 40 out of 73. 37 of those are wides as well, I should say. So, sort of half near enough to, well, there it is half, isn't it? Half the runs scored there have been in wides, so just over. So, that's not particularly flattering. I mean, they've done the job, haven't they? They've knocked them over for 73, but it could have been a lot worse. But 40, the question he put was, the question that Andrew put to us was that, would it count as a Bannerman if Extras got the job done? And I think that it probably would. I think we'd pay that.
Yeah, I think it would have to. And if 40 extras came in 17 overs, That's better than 2 runs per over. So if they'd managed to just to bat out, if they'd managed just to stay there blocking everything for another 3 overs, they would have had another 7 or 8 runs to their total. That shows you the value in batting out the overs. So that early 2000s 50, yet the worst sin in one-day cricket is not to bat out your overs. Got to bat out your overs. That, I think, takes us to the end of the show. It's been the final word. I'm Geoff Lemon. The other one's Adam Collins. We do this show twice a week. We do this as the weekly show. Then on the weekend, we do the history show called Story Time, where we talk about tales from the cricket past. And then at other times, we do daily shows, as we'll be doing for the 3rd test between England and India up at Headingley. Thanks to Brick Lane for sponsoring the show, and also Woodstock Cricket. Remember, you can get sweet discounts. Look in the show notes. Thanks to everyone on the Patreon page who sends us nerd pledges. They're the lifeblood, the reason this show can be made as often as it is. And if you want to sign up to the Patreon, you can also get on the Discord page there, which has everybody who's on there, all our listeners, chatting about the cricket and having a good old time, even when we're not around. I think we've just about covered everything. We're on the Bad Producer Podcast Network, lots of other shows there. David Collins edits the show. And we will be back with you on the dailies and on the weekend for Story Time. Signing out.
Bye.